Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. How are we doing? Woohoo! Good. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Kurt, one of the pastors here. Thanks for joining us this Sunday. Before we get into the message, I wanted to give you a quick little update. The last month or so, we've let you know that we were given an incredible gift and a challenge from a church in Los Angeles that they didn't meet any of you. They unfortunately only got to meet me, which you're the best part of Restoration Church. But by hearing about your story, they were so inspired by what God is doing here that they wanted to be a part of it, and they gave us an incredible gift of $5,000 a month for the next year, investing in the ministry of what God's doing here, and invited us to grow our faith and our worship by responding. And our goal was to raise $5,000 of increased monthly giving from within our community as well. And so our hope was to kind of hit that goal by the end of May. And as of this morning, I wanted to give you the update that we not only hit, but surpassed our goal and hit $5,015 in monthly giving increase for our church, which is going to be, you can clap for that. That's exciting. For those of you that participated in that, thank you so much. We are excited to see how this is going to move our church closer to the vision that God's given us for this year as we continue to empower all people to love and follow Jesus. So thank you for that. Don't worry, we're not taking the offering again. Just wanted to give you the update on that because that was something we were talking about as a community. We are in part 6 of this series, How to Know When You Grow, and we have looked at these different indicators that show up in our life that help us know that we are growing. It's one thing to look back on a season of our life, be like, man, I really grew a lot through that season. It's a different thing to actually see in real time how growth is happening and even perhaps be able to notice and navigate our life towards growth by specific markers. And so we began just kind of giving an overview of the series because it's been a long one. We're a little over halfway through. We began this series talking about how you know when you're growing when your identity is secure, that you're not looking and grasping for other things to tell you who you are, that you know your identity is rooted in who God has made you to be. We then talked about how generosity becoming a joy is a sign that you know you're growing, that generosity is not something we have to, it's something that we get to. It's not something that we avoid or is a drudge, but is an opportunity and a joy. We talked about how rest has become a rhythm, that in a world where busyness is a badge of honor, we actually learn to rest and follow the natural rhythm that God created in order in nature and in our lives, that we need rest in order to be healthy, and that becomes a rhythm for growth. We talked about how forgiveness becomes frequent, that when we're growing, we're in relationship with other people, we need forgiveness, other people need forgiveness, and so forgiveness becomes this free and frequent thing that we do regularly. And like Stanley mentioned last week, we talked about how worship becomes a lifestyle, that it moves beyond a spiritual or religious event that we kind of come to and attend, but it's actually something that we do all week long, and then church or a gathering like this becomes time that we come together to recalibrate and focus on God as a community. But we've already been worshiping at our job, in our neighborhood, in our family, wherever it might be, that worship becomes a lifestyle of centering on God, focusing on Him, and that showing that we love God by loving others. And today, we are talking about how honesty becomes a habit. And it's important because we all want to grow, right? Like growth is something that we all kind of aspire to, and these markers help us actually pursue a full life in Christ. So whether you're considering faith, reconsidering faith, or you're wanting to grow in your faith, if you're not so sure about faith, all of us can benefit from these growth indicators. We might not like them always in every single moment, right? We might dismiss or debate them because, let's be honest, growth is not as smooth and sexy as it sounds on a transformational website, right? Growth can be difficult, it can be challenging, it can even be painful because it's scary. We're stepping into new areas when we grow. But when we engage with these characteristics, we know that we will grow. And it's been so fun to hear different stories from people in our community about how, as they've put these things into practice over the last month or so, they have noticed and seen growth in their life. And so today, as we talk about honesty, we have to be honest, which is ironic, right? That talking about honesty can feel so elementary when it comes to spiritual growth. Like really, we're going to spend an entire week, an entire message just, talking about telling the truth. Like how juvenile. Like why do I have to be reminded to do that? I'm a grown person, right? But I think if we're honest and if we pause for just a moment to reflect on ourselves, when it comes to living a life that tells the truth, it's often harder than we think. We often, will hold back or will exaggerate or embellish. We We hesitate to be so transparent or to be so honest because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, or we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be seen as too much or as too little. And yet in our own personal decisions, we often give ourselves a lot more leeway when it comes to honesty than we do others in our life, others in our home, others at our workplace, or even people we've never met. At some level, deep down, regardless of where you find yourself on the spiritual journey, we all expect honesty and integrity in the world around us, from our boss, our employees, our spouse, our politicians, our children, right? That there is this expectation of honesty. And we know this is true because as much as we have so many receipts on, people not being as honest as we once thought, we are still, part of us is still a little bit surprised and disappointed every time someone's integrity or lack thereof is exposed. And again, as elementary as it may have felt at the time to them and as it may feel this morning, I hope we will take Jesus' intentional invitation that he gives to his followers to actually embrace the difficulty of having a simple relationship with the truth. That if we embrace the challenge of actually living simply, of simply committing to always telling the truth, that difficult choice will actually lead us into healing and to flourishing as we attempt to follow Jesus. Because the reality is, a habit of honesty leads to a life of integrity. A habit of honesty is what leads to a life of integrity. Integrity is not something that you can microwave. It is built over time with intentional steps in a habit, building a habit of honesty. And we have to clarify some terms here, right? Because in a spiritual context like this, integrity is often kind of given with the connotation that it has a moral significance. And while I understand where that comes from, I've felt that way as well. Integrity, by its linguistic definition, isn't a moral idea as much as it is a structural one. That if something has integrity, it often was referring to a building or a boat or something that you would expect to hold the weight of what it looks like it would intend to hold. That the building will stand. The bridge will hold you as you walk across. And that person will be who they've led you to believe that they are. And we expect integrity from people around us, whether we are people of integrity or not, right? Thieves are never expecting to get stolen from, right? And so we have this desire, but yet we have all this space in our own life where, if we have to be honest, the pressure to kind of compromise, to fudge our integrity, to not tell the truth sometimes, right? Those are incredibly important pressures to pay attention to, right? The internal pressure of maybe it's your industry. I've heard this conversation from many people of like if I don't compromise my integrity, there's no way I'm going to make it in this business, right? I'm just going to be left behind, or I can't keep up with the competition, or I'm never going to get a promotion. Well, that's just the nature of what we do. I'm in show business, or I'm a lawyer, right? Like, we have to not tell the truth sometimes, which is an interesting phrase, right? And it's easy to point the finger at politicians or public figures or preachers about truth-telling, and we should. But if we want to grow, we can't just hold other people accountable. We must also ask the personal question, why is it so hard for us to tell the truth sometimes? Whether we're afraid of not measuring up or not being liked, being seen as too much or too little, we edit, we embellish, we exaggerate, we evade the truth in order to cover up our insecurities. Because something that is true about all of us, whether spirituality or religion is a part of your story or not, is that shame avoidance is on every single one of our to-do lists. Shame avoidance is on every single one of our to-do lists. And along the way, we have either decided or discovered, unfortunately, that sometimes the easiest way to avoid shame is just not letting someone else see the real us. But that's exhausting and complicated. Because then you have to remember what story you told who, right? Because when it comes to maintaining our integrity, we have to be real. The deck is really stacked against us. It's stacked against you, and it's stacked against me. So good luck. God bless. What a mess, right? I mean, that's kind of how it feels sometimes. And yet the good news is that Jesus actually demonstrates what we can actually do about this. And this is so important in our life, because in a world of misinformation and AI clickbait, like as followers of Jesus, right, depending on where you're at in that relationship, learning to develop a comfortable relationship with the truth is one of the clearest signs that you are growing. It's one of the clearest signs that you are growing because it kind of brings together a lot of these other things because it requires that you have a secure identity, that you understand that you are not all of who you're created to be yet, but that you are a work in progress. And throughout his ministry, Jesus had this consistent refrain that he came back to of, I tell you the truth, if I tell you the truth. And when his credibility was questioned or when he was bumped or when someone tried to test him or question him, which none of us like, let's be honest, none of us like to be questioned or have our integrity questioned, because often Jesus was caught kind of stepping out of bounds religiously or certainly doing things out of the ordinary. And so people kept showing up with questions of like, who are you and what are you about and what does it mean to follow you into the kingdom of God that you're talking about? And so one of those episodes, and throughout his kind of collection of the life of teachings of Jesus, Jesus' best friend named John records how Jesus engages when he is questioned and how he can teach us what it looks like to develop and cultivate a habit of honesty. So if you have a Bible, I'd invite you to turn to John chapter 8. If you brought your own, you can go there. If not, we got you covered. There's a blue Bible in the seat back pocket in front of you. We're going to jump through quite a bit of the Gospel of John today, so I'd love to invite you to actually grab this Bible if you don't have your own and turn to page 643. That'll fast track you there to John chapter 8. We're going to do a little flipping, so get your fingers ready and try to keep up. All right, we good? John is recording this moment. Jesus has come on the scene. He is starting to be a big deal and kind of attracting a crowd, which, you know, every time you attract a crowd, you also attract some haters. So he had some people questioning him about who he was and why they should listen to him. He had just done a couple miracles. He had saved the woman from being killed, and he had stood toe-to-toe with the religious elite and challenged them, and they respond, starting in verse 25, saying, who are you to do all this, to say all of this, right? Who are you, they demanded. And Jesus replied, I'm the one who I've always claimed to be. And then he says this, I love it, a little sassy, right? He says, I have much to say about you and much to condemn, but I won't. It's always a great way to start a conversation. Hey, I have some thoughts, but you're going to have to guess, right? You know, like he's just being honest, right? And he says, and this is why though, I won't say them. He says, because I only say what I have heard from the one who sent me, and he is completely truthful. They still didn't understand that he was talking about God as Father. Like, I think this is so beautiful that John records, because he was there, Jesus' humanity, where he says, like, hey, I have something that I feel and think that I want to say. Ever been there? But I'm not going to because I'm not sure that it's true. I feel it. It would feel great to say it. But I know that my job is to listen to what is true from God. And so I have thoughts, but I won't say that because I want to listen to the one who speaks the truth to me. Jump down to verse 31. Now, instead of teaching and talking to his haters, he's teaching to his followers, the crowd that was following him around day to day. And he says to these people that believe in him, you truly are my disciples. Like, I know that you've followed me and you love what I'm saying and the free food and wine from water. Those are all good things, right? Glad you're here, but you truly are my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. Then he says this is so profound. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So Jesus says the goal of following me is not to just learn something new, but it's actually to be set free. That understanding the truth is a pathway along the way, but the goal is freedom. The goal of honesty, the goal of a right relationship with reality is to be set free. That is Jesus' goal for your life. And yet, isn't it true that so often the reason we avoid honesty is because we think honesty will trap us? And Jesus says, actually, the truth is what frees you. Flip over a page or two to John 14:6. Jesus is now talking to his closest friends and followers away from the crowd. And Peter has asked him, like, what are we supposed to do with what people are saying about you, Jesus? And he responds to him in John 14:6. Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, that no one comes to the Father except through me. That all this stuff that we've learned, I'm not someone pointing to the way. I'm not someone just telling the truth. I'm not someone that leads you to life. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. And again, this is a challengingly exclusive statement, right? Because in this moment, Jesus is actually declaring that he is not only someone that knows the truth, but that he is the truth. And that begs the question, is he right? Is he right? Because if he's not, then he's a liar. And if he is telling the truth, then we need to listen. Flip over one more page to John 18. This is now the last night of Jesus' life. Jesus has been turned in by the people that should have followed him, and he is now facing trial for his execution in front of the Roman authorities. So Pilate is kind of the Roman officer of the area of Israel. He was woken up in the middle of the night, so he's already upset, and now he has to deal with this, Israeli kind of apocalyptic preacher that everybody's saying is trying to stir up an uprising named Jesus of Nazareth. So he's learning about Jesus for the first time. He doesn't have a whole lot of context. And so he asks the question that he assumes is why Jesus might have been turned in over to the authorities. He says to Jesus in John 18:37, so you're a king? Like you're trying to take political power? You're trying to gain something for yourself? That must be it, right? Jesus responded, you might say I'm a king, but actually I was born and came into this world to testify to the truth. And all who love the truth recognize that what I say is true. So that answers the question from the previous verse we just looked at. But like many of us, Pilate then asks an incredibly important question. One that if we're honest, we often don't ask enough. Pilate says, what is truth? What is truth? Truth is so important, but you have to understand in first century Roman government perspective, truth was relative. Truth was whatever Pilate said it was. It didn't matter what actually happened. It mattered what people in power told you was right. So Pilate asked the question, what is truth? Why is, you're on trial and you're going to get murdered. Who cares what's true? Why aren't you trying to save yourself? Pilate asked that question, then he goes out to the people and told them he's not guilty of any crime. Because isn't it interesting, even when they don't want to, when truth enters a relationship, it's really difficult to continue without it. So Pilate even finds himself saying what is true, even though Jesus eventually was killed anyways. See, isn't it interesting? I find it quite ironic that Christians, people who just decide and claim to follow a person who claim to be the truth, often have a very difficult relationship with the truth. That because we believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, maybe you grew up in church hearing this phrase, I know I did, that we have the truth, we often kind of relate to that, and it metastasizes and manifests itself as a reliance on being right. That our broken relationship with the truth shows up by clinging to what we think we know. And yet, that's very different than what we see Jesus doing in these verses, right? I remember one time I was interviewing for a pastor job. This is so industry specific, so I apologize for my nerdery. But I had to fill out a theological questionnaire to explain to the hiring committee of this church what my positions were on a laundry list of random theological questions, right? Super exciting read, right? And I looked it up in prep for this message. I began my response paper by saying this phrase, on this day, named a date, I think that I think, and then I proceeded to write my answers, which triggered that search committee like crazy, right? They were not ready for that. We spent more time talking about that intro half a sentence than any of my positions on all these different various things, right? Because that exposed something about how we view the truth. That I claimed in the beginning of that this is what I think now, as best I understand it, but that opens up the door that I may change my mind. I may learn something new along the way. That eventually I may even disagree with something that at one point I was seemingly certain of. And Pilate's question is so important for us today because we often cling to the wrong things when it comes to truth. And yet, as much as our culture loves to prop itself up on pluralism and applaud itself for being so accepting of anything and everything, the reality is there's still a line. when it comes to truth. There's still the reality that not everything is okay. And when it comes to lying, that's a space that many people really demonstrate, sometimes without even knowing it, that they know deep down that there is something outside of them that determines what truth is. Because when you hear someone lie, right, you rarely hear the phrase like, yeah, so what? They're like, no, I didn't lie. Like, they defend, no, I didn't lie. I didn't tell the whole truth, but I didn't lie, right? You cheated. What's the big deal? You worked the system for your own benefit and hurt other people. Yeah, why aren't you? Like, nobody responds to those challenges with that kind of thing. They make excuses. They try to excuse the behavior because somewhere deep down in all of us, we don't want to be seen as someone who lied, because that would make us a liar, and being a liar is not good. So we say, no, I didn't lie. Or the reason I lied was, or you don't understand the circumstances I had to, right? Implication, lying is wrong. But yet we find ourselves falling into this trap all the time. Like, let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried to convince someone that you were trustworthy, and in doing so bent the truth? Anybody? Just me, right? Have you ever lied to convince someone that you're not a liar? Like, we find ourselves getting stuck in this trap over and over again because we know better. It's inescapable. As much as we try to be like, it's your truth, you do you, boo-boo. Like, as much as we try to figure that out, it's like, no, it's at some level, if you want to be in relationship with someone else, there has to be an outside of us kind of standard of right and wrong, an objective sense of justice and injustice in the world, and we have to engage with an honest relationship with reality. In the mid-1990s, the late 20th century, there was a movie by the incredible actor Jim Carrey where he was a lawyer that was famous for lying to get his own way, and he had made a great life for himself, never telling the truth. And for his son's birthday, he wished that his dad would not be able to lie for 24 hours. And for the remainder of the movie, just comedy ensues, demonstrating better than any sermon ever could that actually telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is really difficult for us. And so he goes throughout his day just causing mayhem and getting in trouble, and all this stuff is so awkward and hilarious. But then he finds himself at the end of the film figuring out that actually there is a way to communicate the truth that actually frees us, just like Jesus promised. Check this out.
And it says here you were born in 1964, but that's not true either, is it? Is it?
No.
Can you tell me what it says here on your birth certificate under date of birth?
Your Honor, I object. What does this have to do with anything?
Overruled. Mrs. Cole, answer the question.
1965.
Now, let me get this straight. That would mean that you lied about your age to make yourself older. But why would any woman want to do that?
I changed it so I could get married.
And the truth shall set you free. My client lied about her age. She was only 17 when she got married, which makes her a minor. And in the great state of California, no minor can enter into any legal contract without parental consent, including
Prenuptial agreement.
prenuptial agreements. This contract is void. Standard community property applies, and she is entitled to half of the marital assets, or $11.395 million. Jordan fades back, swoosh, and that's the game. Nothing further, Your Honor.
The haircut, the very large double-breasted suit, the Jordan reference. I mean, it's a 90s film. Anyways, the point is, right, when Jim Carrey quotes Jesus, you got to work it into your message. So you get the tension, though, right? Like if we only choose to be honest when it's convenient, there's not much to that. But if we choose to be honest even when it's difficult, even in those moments where you have that like internal tension of wrestling of like, should I say something? I don't want to be like thought of as, a certain way, or like, Or like, ooh, I should really say something. It's like, oh, but I don't know if it's true, but man, it's juicy. I want to pass it along. And you feel that tension when you choose to not give in, when you even recognize that there is truth and there is something else, we actually acknowledge God. Whether we believe in a personal God or not, whether we even acknowledge that Jesus was God, that's not the point for right now. But the reality is that you acknowledge the divine whenever you understand that there is something valuable about honesty. But we know that we have to figure out, how does this work, right? If we want integrity to actually guide us in life, we want to be a person or people known by our integrity, honesty has to show up even when it costs us. That you don't actually know if integrity is actually your guide until honesty costs you something. So what does this look like, right? Because honesty doesn't mean that you say everything that's true, right? Just whatever comes into your brain comes out of your mouth. Like, that's not what this means, right? What honesty means is that everything that you do say is true. That there is a sense in which we understand that if I'm going to say it, I'm going to know it's true and I'm going to know why it is true. Because if honesty was just a pre-written permission slip to say whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, to whoever you want, right? No one would want to be around you. That's still about you. And when it comes to following Jesus, the habit of honesty is always directed to follow Jesus, which is an others-focused orientation when it comes to our life. So what does it really looks like? How do we actually do this? What practically does a habit of honesty look like when it shows up in our life? And the Apostle Paul actually gives some great instruction. He wrote a letter to some early Christians in the city of Ephesus, a port city in modern-day Turkey, where he is helping them understand what does it look like to follow Jesus in relationship. And he writes this in Ephesians 4, verse 29. He says, "Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth." Right now, that word unwholesome doesn't just mean like don't swear, right? Unwholesome was actually a description term that in a port city, they often had fish markets where fish would be left on the street afterwards and things would rot and begin to smell. If you've ever gone down to Seaport Village on a hot summer afternoon, or if you've ever been to Seattle, the famous Seattle fish market, so much fun, but don't go in the afternoon in the summer because the smell is profound, right? And that is exactly what Paul is referencing here. He's doing a little bit of a wordplay we're going to see in a minute, that this unwholesome, where it's rotting, it's decaying, it's falling apart. He says, don't let your words be words like that. That when your words come out of your mouth, they can either rot and decay and take away and tear down, or he says, you could do something different. So don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up, watch this, according to their needs, so that it may benefit those who listen. Don't let unwholesome things that rot and decay and tear down, come out of your mouth, but only what builds others up. What Paul is saying is, you actually are in control of your mouth. I know that's crazy to think about, right? But no one else can really speak for me. The words that come out of my mouth are ones that I send out. Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? Do I understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Paul says, have a filter. It's like when you go to Petco, it's like clear, plastic purses only, right? Like, let your mouth be clear. Let it be selective. That there are words that can come out that are rotten and decaying, and I'm going to choose to not let those. Just like Jesus humanly said, I have things I want to say, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to choose to actually use words that build others up. Now again, you could read that and be like, Paul, that sounds so soft and unproductive. Like, how am I supposed to raise teenagers like that? How am I supposed to do performance reviews at work that way? It's like, hey, like, I don't want to be hard on you, but like, do you mind like coming into work like occasionally? Like, the office opens at 9 o'clock. Like, try to get here while it's still a single digit, if that's okay with you. Like, that's not what Paul's saying, right? He's not saying just be overly nice. What he's saying is that your words are like building blocks. They're building materials, and that every conversation you and I enter into, whether seemingly positive or even especially the not so positive conversations, every conversation is like a construction site. And my goal, if I'm trying to follow Jesus, is to build the other person up. Now, I got to be honest. If you're not sure about Jesus, if you're just checking this out, you are welcome to try it. I think it will help you. But if you've decided to love and follow Jesus, this is actually not optional in the way of love that Jesus modeled and invites his followers to live, that we tailor our words to their needs. Because if I'm honest, right, I often think I'm right, and you do too. That's why we think what we think, right? And I think that they need to hear what I want to say. And yet that's about me. Or other times in my life, maybe you're this way as well, like I'll shrink back or I'll chameleon to what I think they want, or I'll change or adapt, or I'll not say something that I really feel because I don't want to offend or challenge or be too much or be rejected. I have a lot of experience with that feeling as well. And so I'll withhold my honesty. But again, that's still about me. And Jesus says we actually have to turn the dial to where we are uncomfortably honest, because it's not about us, it's about the other person. We view our life, our conversation, as a construction site to build one another up. That they, at the end of it, should be better for it. Maybe they sense it immediately, or maybe they sense it later and they come back and say, hey, that was a really hard conversation and I got mad, but that took a lot of courage for you to say what you needed to say, and I'm glad you said it, and I'm going to work on it. Like I was talking to my coach earlier this week, and he was asking about some spaces that I see growth in my own life, and I referenced back to a conversation I had had with someone that we mutually know that was really, really difficult. It was about 15 years ago, and I still remember it, where she challenged me about some things she saw in my life, some habits and some practices that she saw in my life, where I was trying to grasp for things that weren't actually mine yet. They weren't things I had earned, but I wanted to be seen as wise or valuable. And I said, yeah, that conversation that I had with this person that we knew has actually led me on a lot of self-discovery over these last 15 years. And now I'm really beginning to see it show up in my life, and it almost surprises me. And it was cool to hear him reflect back to me about how he saw that too, but that it was not something I had read about or learned. It was something that I had earned through the practice and the habit of honesty. Because sometimes we can think honesty, it's just about what we have to say, but a habit of honesty also is about listening. That if I'm going to try to follow what Paul says when it comes to our conversations, that it's for others' benefit. I have to become a student of understanding the person across from me, whether that's an individual or a group of people, right? That I have to actually pay attention to that person. And this takes time and effort and energy. And as James writes, it requires that to be quick to listen and maybe even slow to speak. That I posture myself as a student, as a learner, rather than someone who has something to teach. And this is true on an individual level as well as a broader cultural level. Like as we step into June, like I think about Juneteenth coming up in a couple weeks. And I grew up here in Southern California, went to great schools up in Orange County. I loved history. I took the AP U.S. history test, got a 5 on it, thank you. I also actually elected to take U.S. history as my SAT 2 optional test because I loved it so much. So I wasn't like just coasting along U.S. history. I was deep in U.S. history, and I never, ever heard about Juneteenth. It wasn't until we moved to Chicago and I was a full-grown adult and I met people, specifically people of color that grew up in Texas, that I heard about what Juneteenth means and why it's important. And I had to contend in that moment of, are they right or am I right? I had to contend in that moment of, is it possible that I have lived in a space of privilege because this holiday and celebration meant nothing to me because I lived on the West Coast and I grew up in an upper middle class, primarily white neighborhood. And instead, thankfully, I got to learn. I got to ask questions. I got to say these powerful 3 words, I don't know. And it caused me to grapple with, not only individually, but societally, how the history I was taught and that I studied for and memorized and aced the test wasn't all that complete. And that there were other stories that needed to be elevated and listened to. And so perhaps a practical way that you could implement this idea of honesty is to say, yeah, I've heard about that, and now it's like a national holiday, which is great, but I still don't know what it means other than a day off of work. And so on Thursday, June 19th, we're actually hosting an event here where we're showing a film screening that a friend of Katie's that she met through her Transforming Community cohort produced. And he met with Otis May and Lecrae Moore and incredible people that are a part of the Juneteenth story or who have relatives that are, to help us understand how the story and the celebration of Juneteenth actually is connected to the faith of following Jesus. That the truth is designed to set us free. And rather than burying our heads in the sand and hiding behind our privilege, learning about it actually is a great step forward. And so maybe for you to mark that on your calendar and to join us that night, to not only learn yourself, but to do some good in the process could be a great step. Because as we engage in this others first orientation of following Jesus, right, that everything in our life is designed to be considerate of and building up, constructing others up. And again, it's easy to talk about with a Britney Spears microphone up here. That does not mean that I got it all figured out. That does not mean that I'm perfect in this. I am very much a work in progress. But I think the idea of honesty becoming a habit really gets to the core of what it looks like to love and follow Jesus, because we have to have a healthy relationship with the truth if we want to follow the one who claims to be the truth. John, again, the same person who wrote that first set of passages we read, where the gospel is kind of his account of the story and the life of Jesus, where he follows along the teachings of Jesus throughout his life. Later in his life, writes 3 different letters to Christians, to little groups of churches, encouraging them about what it looks like to love and follow Jesus, someone they had never met. He says, hey, I've met him personally, and I want to tell you what it's like, tell you what he was like, and tell you what that looks like for you. And so in 1 John 1, verses 3 through 10, he writes one of these letters to these early followers of Jesus, demonstrating, this is so important, don't miss this, how honesty is inseparable from both our relationship with God and our connection and community with others. So he writes this in verse 3. He says, we proclaim to you what we ourselves have actually seen and heard, so that you may have fellowship with us. I'm telling you why you can believe what I'm about to say up front, right? We're telling you what we know is true because we saw it with our own eyes and experienced it in our own life. And our fellowship is with God the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. And we are writing these things so that you may fully share in our joy, right? I'm telling you the goal up front because what I'm about to say is kind of challenging, right? So John is a great writer. He goes, this is why it's going to be joyful. It's going to be hard on the way. Sounds like growth. All right. He says, this is the message that we heard from Jesus and now declare to you. God is light, and there is no darkness in him at all. And so we are lying if we say we have fellowship with God, but we go on living in spiritual darkness. We are not practicing the truth. Again, John seems to have come to this understanding by spending time with Jesus that the truth was not something to acknowledge, but something to practice. It was a way of living, not something to memorize. It says we're living, but if we're living in the light as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all sin. We often, if we're honest, in modern American churchianity, focus on the second one to the abdication of the first one. Oh, Jesus, cleanse me from all my sin. But living in the light and having fellowship with other people, I can avoid that. And yet John seems to reverse the order. He says if we claim that we have no sin, we're only fooling ourselves and we're not living in the truth. Again, there's that active present posture phrasing again. But if we confess our sins to him, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all wickedness. But if we claim we have not sinned, we are calling God a liar and showing that his word has no place in our hearts. So John is doing this juxtaposition, this back and forth of light, dark, light, dark. If you live in the light, these things happen, and if you don't, this is what's really going on, no matter how much I try to hide it or avoid it or explain it away. That this back and forth tension that we all experience is part of the journey of spiritual growth. And John says, if you want to grow in your relationship with God and relationship with people, the tactic is the same. It is to have the willingness to create a habit of honesty, as he puts it, to step into the light. Because it is virtually impossible to have a healthy relationship with someone who does not have a healthy relationship with the truth. And say it again. It is virtually impossible to have a healthy relationship with someone who does not have a healthy relationship with the truth. And also, it is virtually impossible to heal, repair, or restore a relationship without honesty becoming a habit that continues. So if you miss everything else, please remember this, right? Especially if you're a parent or a grandparent, or if you're married, or if you're in love with someone, or if you're engaged, or if someone loves you back and they want to spend the rest of their life with you, right? Or if you work with people, or you live near people, or you're on a team with people, or if you've trying to raise little people in your house. So that's, I covered everybody, I think, right? If you are people, listen to this. This is so important, right? The health of your relationships, the respect that you desire from your spouse, your children, your teammate, your employees, is contingent on you living in the light, not you always being right. It is okay to make mistakes. You don't have to get it right all the time. They don't expect you to always be perfect. But when we live in the light, that is where respect and connection, fellowship, community is created. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not know. It's okay to mess up. It's not okay to cover it up. It's not okay to lie about your mistakes. It's not okay to excuse them away. Think about it. Whether you're a person of faith or not, you gravitate towards people that when they mess up, they own up and they clean it up. Right? Those are the people you want to be in relationship with, because that's what a healthy relationship looks like. Not perfect, but honest. And it's a habit. Honesty is a habit. It is not a one-time thing. You cannot just like microwave it. It is earned and developed over time like a muscle. And it takes time to strengthen it, but you can start practicing it today. And here's my challenge, is because you took time to be here, because you're watching online, I hope and pray that when sometime this week that I believe will happen to you, maybe before this day is over, you're going to feel it, where you are tempted to kind of do that dance in between the light and the dark, and you feel it in your body, you feel it in your soul or in your throat or in your chest, that choice is right before you. Am I going to shrink back into the darkness and try to get out of this, or am I going to stay strong and stand in the light? That you would notice that tension, and you would recognize, ooh, right now, I have an opportunity to grow. But what if I get rejected? Or what if I get found out? Or what if it's difficult to have that conversation? It might be all of those things. But when we live in the light, when we're honest about ourselves, when we come really as we are, that is when we can grow. And the good news is that the one who is the truth didn't use that truth to condemn us. Didn't know the truth and hold it over our head. That the one who claimed to be the truth loved us enough to tell us the truth about us, about God, and reminds us that while we may be scared of it, we are all better off when we have a habit of choosing to be honest. That while we think it will hold us back, the truth actually will set us free when we are more committed to being honest than to looking good, just feeling comfortable, or being right. Because the reality is that honesty is always the first step to healing. For those of you that have ever gone through recovery groups, it's the first of 12 steps to acknowledge that I cannot do this on my own. Right? Honesty is the first step to healing. And so if we want to heal, if we want to be set free, if we want to be restored, if collectively we want to be a restorative community, we have to develop and cultivate a habit of honesty, which is why the communion table is such a beautiful reminder that we celebrate each month when we come back to the center point of the Christian tradition, where Jesus says, you get to come as you are, but you have to come. Not some fake version of you, not some facade that you and I try to pick up. The religious posturing around a table it's easy to do that in a row. It's really hard to do that around a table. And on the night before, he would have the conversation with Pilate about what is truth, and that he would ultimately be arrested and crucified and give his life as a ransom for all of us. He gathered his friends in an upper room, He was honest with them about who he was, what he was here to do, and what was coming ahead. And he was honest with them about the part that some of them even played in it. And yet to the one that would deny him, and the one that would betray him, and the one who would desert him, the many who would desert him, and even to the one that would stick by him to the end, he served them all equally. And he grabbed the bread, a familiar element that they were used to, and said, hey, I'm going to give this familiar thing new meaning. This bread is my body, and it's broken for you. That the reality of what is necessary is that you would experience brokenness before you experience healing. And after the end of the meal, he grabbed the cup and he said, this is the new covenant of my blood. It's a fancy way of saying this is the new way that you and I get to relate to God. The old religious patterns have passed, and now because of what's about to happen, you and I have freedom to come and enjoy relationship with God, and that this table is called communion, not just because it connects us to God, but because it connects us to one another. Because when you come to the table, everybody's invited. It's not ours to gatekeep. It's not ours to judge. It's not even Restoration Church's table. It's Jesus' table. And he is who made it possible for me and for you to come forward freely. But we, the real us, is the only option to come forward with. To acknowledge that I can't do this on my own. That I, in and of myself, need help. And that honesty and that habit of honesty would be begun and developed at the community table, because as we practice being honest with God, the one who already knows everything anyways, and who loves you perfectly, and we recognize that even with God, when we come forward with our falsehoods and our mistakes, that we are met with grace and love. That might not be true with our boss or our spouse, but it's true with God. When we practice being honest with God, it helps make it easier to develop a practice and a habit of honesty in the rest of our life. And so in a moment, our team's going to come forward, and I invite you, when you feel ready, to come forward to grab a piece of bread. You can dip it in the cup. If you need gluten-free communion, there are sealed, little element cups that you can take on your own. We don't want anyone to miss out on coming to the table, because this is the invitation in front of all of us to honestly, as we are, come to Jesus and to say, you are the truth. Not something to cognitively acknowledge, but someone to follow, someone to believe in, someone to listen to, and an example to follow. So I want to pray for us. So I'd invite you to stand if you're able. We take a posture of prayer right here, where we hold our hands open. We say, God, whatever you got, I want. And I'm open to letting go of what I've been maybe holding on to that maybe I've thought was helping, but it's holding me back. So I'd invite you, if you feel comfortable, to hold your hands open. Maybe you can close your eyes. Take a deep breath, and even in this grounded moment, to recognize where it is that each of us have brought in something that we hide behind. A space that we posture or hold back or fake or exaggerate. And would, in this moment, as short as it may feel, would you be willing to come to the table, to come before God honestly, authentically as you are, knowing that you will be met with grace. Jesus, thank you that you don't just know the truth, you are the truth. And when we come into relationship with you, we can't help but be a little more honest. So I pray, as we follow you, as we feel that tension this week of wanting to run back to the dark rather than staying in the light, whether that's to say something big and to defend ourselves, or whether that's to shrink back and adapt and withhold. I know I experience the tension of both. God, would you, by your Spirit, encourage us and remind us that you know us and you love us. And as we develop a habit of honesty, it is a pathway to growth. So will we remember, as we come to the table, that we have communion with you and with each other when we cultivate a habit of honesty. God, thank you that you are worthy, that you are trustworthy, and that you are loving. We pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, our team is here. They would love to serve you as you feel ready. Feel free to come forward, and then we're going to spend time singing together. The words will be up on the screen. But thanks for joining us today.